Welcome into Morning Invest, everyone. I'm Clayton Morris. This is June 11th, 2020. We've got big updates on the stimulus front and forecasts for the economy. We heard from Treasury Secretary Mnuchin yesterday at a Senate Banking Committee hearing. There was bipartisan love fest. There was a lot of kissing, a lot of praising going on for the Treasury Secretary from both sides of the aisle on the PPP programs and other stimulus packages. So will we see another one? He was very encouraged that we would work on another stimulus package in the next few weeks. But it wasn't so good for the Small Business Administration, who was also at that Senate Banking Committee hearing. Oh boy, they were not happy with the SBA. And what in the world are they doing with these loans that were supposed to work next to the PPP program? They've been a total disaster, and only 15% of them have gone out. So senators took to grilling the SBA administrator yesterday. Plus, did you see what happened on the floor of the Senate yesterday? When we've all been talking here on the show, what in the world is Mitch McConnell and the Senate going to do? Are they tone deaf? Are they listening to the American people right now who are hurting? Well, Bernie Sanders hears that, and he had this to say yesterday.
This is the worst do-nothing Senate in modern American history, and every member of this body should be deeply ashamed.
Ouch. Ouch. So we'll hear more from him on what the Senate should be doing coming up. Also, the Federal Reserve yesterday, Fed Chief Jerome Powell speaking for an hour-long press conference where he gave their economic forecast for the rest of the year. Now, they held off on doing this back in March, so we will hear from the Fed chair today on the show. What are their expectations? How long do they see this recovery? And what type of stimulus plan are they going to put in place? Now, I've titled this video "An Endless Stimulus" because that comes right from the Fed chief's mouth. We could see a regular continued stimulus from the Federal Reserve for years to come. Years to come. On the Federal Reserve side, that makes Wall Street happy, that makes businesses happy, but that doesn't help the average American, does it? So we'll talk about that. Also, we'll show you the second wave of coronavirus now topping 2 million cases. We'll show you the states that have reopened, that are getting hit the hardest this morning. We've got the map, we've got the details, so big concerns there. So welcome into the show. I'm Clayton Morris, longtime real estate investor. I've created multiple seven-figure companies, spent a long time in the news business, and this is the show where we aim to bring you a little bit of financial intelligence, the stuff that I think affects your wallet, your family's future, not the Wall Street stuff. That's for CNBC, that's for those other channels. This is economic, personal financial news to help you. So if you are new here, please consider subscribing to the channel. We do this show every day at 9 a.m. Eastern time, so you can join us for the live show. We have a little Q&A before the show starts, and we get to hang out. So we're going to dive right now into the second stimulus and what we will see from the federal government on this. There was two big things, I think, that emerged yesterday for me at the Senate Banking Committee hearing. They all got together. I was surprised to see them all in a room. They weren't doing this virtually yesterday. It's chaired by Senator Marco Rubio, and all of them were there. Senator Collins, Senator Mitt Romney, Senator Cardin, they were all in that room, and so too was Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and the SBA loan administrator as well. And so they went back and forth in a bipartisan way, sort of praising the Treasury Secretary for the government's response on the PPP loan program and getting stimulus payments out to the American people. There were a number of senators, Democrats as well, that praised Senator Mnuchin, or Secretary Mnuchin. In fact, Maria Cantwell, a Washington Democrat, said, "I saw Secretary Mnuchin many hours, day and night, working around the clock." And that wasn't it. We also heard from Senator Scott, which we'll play in just a second. But there were two big things. One, there was a bipartisan love fest, I thought, for Secretary Mnuchin. But the SBA administrator and the SBA loan program got slammed, absolutely eviscerated yesterday, because they have not rolled out the loans that the Congress has appropriated for them to roll out. They were sitting there scratching their head like, what are you doing? We gave you this money. Why are you not lending it out? I thought this point from Senator Cardin was particularly poignant. He said that one particular business he was speaking to was waiting on this loan, couldn't get it because it was in some sort of a computer queue somewhere, and then had to end up pulling money out of their PPP program in order to move forward. So take a listen to Ben Cardin. He was not happy.
But we've never had a universal disaster before. And the volume level, as we understand it, only 15% of loans were processed, and that there's still a huge backlog in processing these loans. And we made significantly more capacity available to you through the appropriation process so that you can issue a lot more of these loans. You've put a cap on the program. We don't understand why. You've delayed the applications of those that have already been filed, and you've closed the window to non-agricultural programs. Why is the EIDL program not being used to its full capacity, and what can we expect in the future moving forward?
Senator Cardin, I agree with your frustration and your assessment of the delayed process. However, let me start out with the agricultural, the small farms and the co-ops.
I agree with your frustration. I agree with your frustration. It didn't stop there because she didn't have answers. She didn't have answers, and then Senator Hawley laid into her as well. He's been frustrated from a lack of transparency from the SBA, trying to get answers as to why these loans have not gone out and what kind of mess these people's processed loan applications are sitting in. People have been waiting 8 weeks or longer to try to get these loans in place. And they've been sitting there. They keep checking on their computer and they have no access to it. So how many of you are small business owners right now that have been waiting on these loans? I've seen all of your comments coming through here on the channel. When is the SBA going to get my loan approved? This was Senator Hawley. Listen to him. He's really mad.
System in place to flag applications like
At that given
Planned
time,
Parenthood.
that's correct.
Despite the fact, I might add, that the affiliation rule was pretty fiercely debated as part of the PPP package, as part of the CARES package, amended several times. Tell me about the Planned Parenthood affiliates that wrongly receive funds. How many of those has SBA contacted now?
At this point, I wouldn't be able to speak about a particular loan situation. So
Why?
it's proprietary information, and it's...
I'm not asking about a loan situation. I'm asking how many you've contacted. The SBA's put out a statement saying that you've contacted the affiliates. You sent letters. That's been publicly reported.
Yes, no.
How many?
The office did receive your letters, and we acted accordingly. But at this point, giving the detail on a particular borrower would just not be...
So you can confirm for the record that you've sent letters to Planned Parenthood affiliates, but you won't tell us how many? That's your testimony?
No, I'm saying that the affiliation or any borrower that we are taking a course of action is that indeed, and I don't talk about the particulars.
How many Planned Parenthood affiliates have returned the funds?
Again, I have to take the position that I'm not able to...
And it just went on like that. She's like, I'll talk to you later about it. He's like, no, you're here right now testifying. You can tell me publicly. You don't have to go behind closed doors and tell me. How many of these loans have been returned? There was a lot of erroneous loans sent out to places that shouldn't have received them. When are they sending them back? What about the companies that haven't received those yet? These businesses that are struggling. Why can't you tell us? So he's been frustrated by the lack of transparency from the SBA, and it showed yesterday. But once again, I mentioned the silver lining in all of this was the praise for Treasury Secretary Mnuchin. Now, I don't know where you come down on that. I will put the news out there and let you make your decision about how you feel about this. But Senator Scott particularly praised the PPP program for saving a lot of businesses. I think that is accurate, that the PPP program, both from the Fed Chief Jerome Powell and others, this has saved a lot of businesses from going under. I think, though, as we'll hear from Secretary Mnuchin in a second, we need more targeted and maybe even extended PPP assistance for businesses to keep people in jobs. But listen to Senator Scott praising Treasury Secretary Mnuchin.
Every single small business owner that I spoke to around the country had this exact same words, that without the Paycheck Protection Program, they would not have survived. So survival was the key and the focus. But now the focus turns from survival to recovery. And so as we think about recovery, my question is, as June 30th comes sooner than some would like, many are asking about a second bite at that apple. Is there an opportunity as you all think through where we should go? Is there an appetite for folks to perhaps see another 4 weeks of the PPP in addition to what they already have? And/or are there any other ideas that are on the table that speaks to the recovery aspect of where we are and not simply the survival mode that we have been in? to either panelist.
Well, Senator Scott, thank you and appreciate all of your help. I definitely think we are going to need another bipartisan legislation to put more money into the economy. I think, as we've said, we don't want to rush into that because we want to be both careful at this point in seeing how the money is in the economy. A lot of the money is still not in it. And two, I think we need to be much more targeted at this point. So I think at the point when we were in an emergency, we had to put a lot of money in the economy, and we knew that it would not be perfection. But I think whatever we do going forward needs to be much more targeted, particularly to the industries and small businesses that are having the most difficulty in reopening as a result of COVID-19. And we look forward to working with you and the rest of the committee over the next few weeks as we think about that.
Okay, so that's Treasury Secretary Mnuchin on the next stimulus. And we heard from Kevin Hastert, of course, yesterday that there is appetite for the White House to do a very, very, as he said, very, very high likelihood of another stimulus. So as this thing comes together, let's dive deeper now into what Treasury Secretary Mnuchin would want. He was asked by Senator John Kennedy yesterday, if you were king for a day, Mr. Secretary, what would you put in this next bill? Specifically, what would you put in this next bill? And this is what Secretary Mnuchin said. He said, direct money to stimulate the economy. What does that mean? Does that mean an additional round of checks? Because I've seen them backing off of this idea of another direct payment. But that's the first thing he said, direct money to stimulate the economy. The way that you stimulate the economy is what the Fed chief has been saying, is to get money into the hands of you and me for spending. So if he were king for a day, that would be the very first thing that he does. The second thing that he would do is encourage businesses to rehire people. Encourage people to be rehired. They would do that, of course, with, again, additional stimulus money to help businesses, maybe some sort of incentive to get back to work, that $450 bonus per week in order to go back to work. Support for travel, leisure, and restaurant sectors. That's one part of the economy they talked about yesterday quite extensively, is restaurants, travel, and leisure that are being just crushed right now. And he thought there would be additional stimulus money for restaurants and those businesses because of social distancing. So those businesses, those restaurants, they haven't even been able to do indoor seating yet in many places, which he yesterday thought was a bit ridiculous. He said, I'm glad to see Washington, D.C. businesses or restaurants are reopening. However, what's with all the outside seating? If we were properly socially distanced inside, not tables on top of each other, we can do that if we're smart about it. And those restaurants that have those half tables inside, they're operating at 50% capacity. They need assistance or they're going to go under. They're absolutely going to go bankrupt or close down for good. And address the unemployment issue would be the fourth thing on his list. He said that the economy has already started to recover, and he cited that the most recent jobs report showed a net gain of 2.5 million jobs, and future stimulus could take several paths, but he didn't have any exact dollar amounts. He hasn't said anything beyond that. And again, I come back to that direct money to stimulate the economy is the first thing that he would want. I don't believe that there's an appetite in Congress for a new round of direct payments to people, but we'll see. Maybe there is some movement on that. We did hear that yesterday from the Federal Reserve, and we'll get to that in a moment, on their forecast and how long it will take us to recover. So that's Senator Mnuchin on the economy. A fourth round of fiscal stimulus should include help for travel, retail, leisure, and possibly more cash for American families. So there was some good news. John, one of our viewers this morning, said, Clayton, give me some good news. I know, look, I know that it's frustrating. We go back and forth on this, but we have to. One day we're hearing from, Senator McConnell that doesn't want to, really doesn't want to push for an additional stimulus. Maybe he wants to have a targeted, smaller stimulus, no unemployment benefits extensions. And then the next day we hear that the White House is open to unemployment, some sort of employment package, unemployment benefits that's not $600, but maybe $450. So it's a lot of this back and forth right now. I know it's incredibly frustrating. Trust me, as much as I read on this and dive deep, I'm trying to see through all of the smoke and all of this to bring you the latest. But where there was smoke, there was fire yesterday on the floor of the Senate. Because I think you and I both have been frustrated with the speed with which the Senate has moved on this, which is like watching a turtle, pull a truck. It's been painful to watch. Now, in fairness, the House of Representatives moved pretty quickly. Not in the beginning. There was a lot of bickering at the beginning of the CARES Act, so shame on the House of Representatives. But on this HEROES Act, they got it onto the desk of the Senate. They got it passed quickly before their break, and the Senate just sat on it and did nothing. Well, Senator Bernie Sanders yesterday went ape. He flipped out on the floor of the Senate. And it's worth playing. It's about a minute long. I want you to hear what the senator said. He just eviscerates his fellow senators for doing nothing. Take a listen.
In the midst of this horrific healthcare crisis, in the midst of this economic meltdown, the American people are demanding to know what their government is doing in response to these crises. We were elected as senators, members of the House, to respond to the needs of the American people. And all over this country, the American people are looking around them. They see the struggle for racial justice. They see a pandemic. They see an economic meltdown. And many of them are asking what the Republican leadership here in the Senate is doing. Crisis after crisis after crisis. And what is the leadership here in the Senate doing? And tragically, Mr. President, the answer is nothing.
He went on to say that historians will look upon this period similar to the fall of Rome. And, I don't want to put too much on that. I've talked about collapse before here on the show. I think the Federal Reserve has done quite a bit to keep us afloat. But when you look at the U.S. dollar, which is on the verge of collapse, you cannot help but feel like the superpower we once were. That is a thing of distant past. So Senator Sanders went on further to talk about the fall of Rome and why he sees some similarities here to what unfolded when Nero was in charge of Rome. Listen to this.
Nothing. Historians have suggested that in the year 64 AD, while Rome was burning, the Emperor Nero played his fiddle. At least he did something. He provided entertainment to his court. But here in the U.S. Senate, Republican leader McConnell and his leadership team are doing nothing. Sadly, tragically, this is the worst do-nothing Senate in modern American history, and every member of this body should be deeply ashamed.
Ouch. Feel that burn. He just scorched the Republican leadership for doing nothing. And they're going to go on this 2-week break here over the 4th of July holiday, having done nothing. And all likelihood, we'll see a fourth stimulus package passed before they go on their August recess. But you heard some of the senators asking Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, look, when these 4 weeks are up, when these things expire at the end of June, and these businesses have not gotten their SBA loans yet, they've exhausted any extra stimulus benefits, they're facing evictions, what are we going to do? And it comes down to the Senate right now to do something. So I encourage you to watch his full remarks, but it was pretty strong yesterday from Bernie Sanders. Let's talk now about the Federal Reserve. In the Federal Reserve yesterday, Jerome Powell gave their forecast for the economy going forward. And this is something that they held off on doing back in March of this year because it was too chaotic. And so they didn't want to present a forecast for the year where there were so many variables in play. But it was a grim picture. It was a grim picture yesterday from Jerome Powell. He spoke for about 15 minutes and then he opened it up for questions from reporters on the next round of stimulus, et cetera. But he didn't paint a positive picture. In about an hour-long press conference, he said we're going to leave interest rates near zero. He repeatedly played down the big surprise job growth numbers. He was really downplaying Friday's jobs report. He was encouraged, but Trump last week was calling it the greatest comeback, and he went the opposite direction on that. He's like, I want to be cautiously optimistic here, and he thinks it's going to get worse before it gets better. Instead, he said that millions of Americans are still out of work. So he put his attention on the fact that millions of Americans are still out of work. And he said it could take years to return to anything like the strong labor markets that we saw pre-COVID-19. Now, his numbers really were similar to what we saw from the Congressional Budget Office just the other day, where they predicted it could take us up to 10 years to get back and fully recovered where we were pre-COVID. His numbers seem to suggest something similar. It would take years. He said, we have to be honest. It's a long road. It's, depending on how you count it, well more than 20 million people displaced in the labor market. So Fed Chief Jerome Powell had this to say about their plans. Now, I titled this video Endless Stimulus, because he was asked about this by reporters, and he's basically saying, we're going to have stimulus that's going to continue for years. Years. That's basically an endless stimulus. They're going to continue to buy up these junk bonds. They're going to continue to pump money into the markets, and Wall Street's going to be happy for many, many years. This is exactly what Wall Street wanted to hear. They're going to continue to buy up these mortgage-backed securities. They're going to continue to buy up all the garbage, and they're doing it at $4 billion per day right now. $4 billion per day. And he said, we're going to keep it going just the way that we are. And there might be a gradual decline. Listen to the Fed chief.
Gradually reduce the pace of these purchases. To sustain smooth market functioning and thereby foster the effective transmission of monetary policy to broader financial conditions, we will increase our holdings of Treasury and agency mortgage-backed securities over coming months, at least at the current pace. We will closely monitor developments and are prepared to adjust our plans as appropriate to support our goals. The Federal Reserve is also undertaking programs to provide stability to the financial system and to more directly support the flow of credit in the economy, for households, for businesses of all sizes, and for state and local governments.
That's important. So again, keeping that liquidity going in the market so that you can get mortgages, you can sell your house, buy a house, get refinancing, get loans, get available credit for lending, that commercial paper market, supporting that. Look, if lending collapses, it's game over. So the Fed has been largely praised by their response. But once again, it has very little effect on Main Street. It has very little effect on you and me. Now, they do have a couple of facilities that they rolled out, their Main Street facility, which would be able to allow small businesses to get access to this aid. They had to do a massive analysis to find out which businesses were being crushed and could they inject some additional loans to these small businesses. They had to figure out who was hurting. There's not like a database or a website someone can just log in and say, hey, I'm hurting. So they had to meet with state and local leaders to identify where these small businesses were that weren't able to pay the rent. It's been a disaster. But in fairness, the Federal Reserve has done a great job of stepping up to this. But that, again, supports Wall Street. It helps businesses. It's a bailout for bigger businesses. And we heard from a member of Wall Street yesterday. We heard from a financial advisor on Wall Street who said, if we're in a recession, we win. If we're out of a recession, we win on Wall Street. I brought this up yesterday, but I think it's poignant. Meaning that when they're in a recession, the Fed will step in and protect them, keep them afloat, and they'll still be profitable, which is what's happening. And Wall Street's numbers are going to record-breaking numbers right now. And if they're out of a recession, then good, they're winning. They're also winning. Stark contrast to the average American, particularly black communities, minority communities. Good for Marco Rubio yesterday for bringing this up during the meeting, during the hearing. He was talking about how cash reserves for black-owned businesses, 95% of black-owned businesses only had about 2 weeks of reserves for cash. So they have no money. They have no money available. If they don't have customers coming through the door, they're pretty much done. Exactly, fly, get off me. So these businesses need capital to stay afloat and to be able to hire individuals. So any round of new stimulus from the White House, the Senate, is going to include some sort of targeted approach for employment and keeping people in these jobs. Restaurant, leisure, those types of industries, hospitality, that have been crushed. And particularly, those are the jobs that have crushed minority communities, the service sector workers that have totally lost their jobs. So how do we get those jobs back? But it's going to be a long road. It's going to be a long road. And we're also looking at the collapse of the US dollar. I mean, that's coming, folks. With the Federal Reserve on a continued spending spree or a continued lending spree, buying up these things at $4 billion a day, trying to keep the inflationary rate at 2%, trying to get money into these businesses and basically bailing them out. This money that's being printed and generated, the US dollar is going to become virtually worthless. And as we move to like this cashless society, which I believe is coming, cryptocurrency, digital, who's going to be walking around with paper bills anymore? It's becoming the villain right now. So it's all the reason right now to move into some sort of a crypto savings account, something that can protect you and your family. I've been telling you about our friends over at Outlet who have done an amazing job. So it's a savings account alternative. And it's not available in like 6 states. I know some of you have complained. You said, why are they not available in New York? So if you go to this link right here, morrisinvest.com/outlet, you'll able to open a savings account alternative with a 6% interest rate. Right now, it's at 8.5% interest rate for a savings account. Now, it's backed by cryptocurrency. It's backed by Ethereum, which is one of the 2 big ones. You have Bitcoin, you have Ethereum. And we know how much Ethereum, we know how much Bitcoin exists in the marketplace. It's not like the dollar, which they can just print like crazy whenever they want. With Bitcoin and Ethereum, governments don't have access to it. That's the beauty of it. It's the people's currency. And as I learn more and more and more about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, the more excited I become, and the more money of it, more of my money I'm putting into like this account, so that I can be protected and also get a huge interest rate. So your normal savings account is like a 0.01%, and with the Treasury keeping those numbers at that low right now, the Federal Reserve keeping numbers that low, like 0% interest rates, you're making nothing in a traditional savings account. So with like this Outlet account, you can open it, you can put in like $5 to start it off, and they'll actually deposit free money in the account for you when you open your account. So check it out. I love it. Right now, they save the, I wish I had my account in front of me. I'll show you the number. It's at 8.5% interest rate. And their goal is to always keep it right at 6%, backed by cryptocurrency. So I'd encourage you to check it out. It's not for everybody, but this is the future. And you better be on board with the government currency is collapsing. It's a really smart time to be looking at alternative forms of banking, to be outside of this corrupt system. Good for the Fed doing what they're doing. But let's be honest, I would not want to have my family's future and retirement tied to cash, US dollars. No way, the way that they're printing this stuff. No way. So check it out. Go to that link right there. We'll have it in the show notes too if you're interested. Many of you have been asking me to do an update on that, so I will. Let's talk about reopening right now. Oh boy. So headlines around the world today, 2 million cases, 2 million new cases, and experts believe we are seeing a second wave starting to unfold. Let me read this to you he's a senior scholar at Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, Eric Toner. He said this, and I was struck by this quote. He said, "There is a new wave of coronavirus coming in parts of the country. It's small and it's distant so far, but it's coming. There's a new wave coming." And we're already seeing it. So take a look at the latest numbers. Take a look at the map right now. This is where, around the world, we're seeing, so Oregon, take a look at Oregon right now. Oregon is one of the hot spots, up 77% in Oregon. Arizona, New Mexico, look at Arizona. That's up, 58%. 58%. New Mexico, any of the brown ones are the ones where we're seeing resurgent. New Mexico is looking 63% high. Now, for some reason, the map wouldn't let me pull up Florida. I don't know why. But I will tell you, Florida is in dark brown, and it's up 65%. Up 65%. North Carolina. Look at North Carolina. 26%, right? 41% in South Carolina. Georgia up 13%. Look at Oklahoma. Now, let's keep our eyes on Oklahoma here. This is interesting. Why? Oklahoma is up 21%, and that's where President Trump wants to hold his rally. He has said that he wants to do his first, his Make America Great Again rallies, and he wants to start in Oklahoma. He wants to start in Tulsa. Okay, so again, you want to start reopening, you want to start going to do these rallies in 2 weeks with all of these people crammed together. Okay, and we might be fine. I'm hoping that we're fine. But you're going to do it in a state right now that is having a huge spike in cases. In Oklahoma? Okay. Nevada also going up 44%. Utah up 49%. But this is the trouble zone right here. Oregon down through Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, and then through the south. Again, Florida is one of the worst, up 65%. And then if we go up to North Dakota, also in brown, and South Dakota. If you're in blue, that means you're down. And white, it just means you're neutral. So Texas right now, after we saw a big spike in cases, has returned to a neutral position. It's up 7%. So Texas on Wednesday. Texas on Wednesday had a new 2,500 new cases. It's the highest one-day total since the pandemic started. Florida reported 8,000 new cases. That's the most in any 7-day period. California also, hospitalizations at their highest since May 13th. They've risen 9 of the past 10 days. And look, this is overall, the nation's cases rose under 1%, which was good news. The localized surges, though, are the biggest problem. So you have these localized surges. Overall, though, we're only up 1% since March. So that's the very latest on reopening. Secretary Mnuchin yesterday in his testimony talked about why he didn't understand why these restaurants couldn't start reopening and having people eating inside. Many of the restaurants are only allowed to do outside seating right now. He said that he found that to be somewhat ridiculous, that if we social distance indoors, that would help them. So he's calling on, he's actually talking about easing those restrictions. The Senate asked him yesterday if they would ease some of those restrictions as well. For restaurants, they said yes, they are. So we could see restaurants doing more of that. But again, we're starting to see this resurgence of cases. What I find interesting, though, is that in the data, they're not necessarily seeing that because people got together in large groups, that this is the reason why we're seeing this second wave. Don't you find that interesting? I do. For instance, they looked at one hair salon. She was infected with COVID. She saw 140 clients. None of them got sick. And they're trying to figure out why not. Why did none of them get sick? And then in other areas, in other sectors, you're seeing all these people coming together, and they're not sure if they're seeing the transmission from those large groups or gatherings. So that could be encouraging for President Trump if he wants to hold those rallies in Oklahoma. I don't know, but it's interesting. I still think there's so much we don't know about this virus and how it's transferred, that we're trying to practice social distancing, and yet when large groups got together, they didn't really see a spike. I don't get it. Like the Missouri pool party during Memorial Day, like one person got sick, I think, right? There was not many. I would have thought that would have been like, holy smokes, look at all the people in the Ozarks that got sick because of that pool party. Unless I missed it, maybe I did. I didn't see anyone getting really, really sick from that. So it's odd. Let me know your thoughts right now. Are you going out to restaurants? Are you visiting friends? Are you kind of getting back to normal? Or are you still concerned? Do you have people in your family that are elderly, that maybe, higher body weight, that are more vulnerable, have diabetes, etc.? Those individuals are obviously more prone to catching coronavirus, and it could be deadly. So it'll be interesting to see. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So that, my friends, is the big show today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to open it up for Q&A here in a second if you want to hang around for the live show. But please consider subscribing to the channel if you're new here. And yesterday, I think we broke a record. I want to see it. Now we have almost 7,000 people watching right now. Can you smash that like button? I want to try to get as close to 7,000 as we can today on the show. That would be awesome. So thank you so much. That's my one little thing I ask. If you just smash the like button and subscribe. You can also hit that little bell notification when you subscribe, and what that does is that when we go live, you'll get a notification so you can join us for our pre-show where we hang out, we do some Q&A and have some fun.